got some good stuff going on today that I want to talk about. And it all stemmed from a discussion. And I get into these discussions all the time about driver pay. And the person that I was talking to said to me, well, it's unskilled labor. And when someone says that to you, that right away you're talking to someone that's never driven a truck before. Because anyone that's ever driven a truck knows what's involved and what's entailed, and that it is not unskilled labor. It's anything but. So now the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to back up what we've been saying all along, has determined that now truck driving is the #1 most dangerous job in America. One of the most stressful parts of any truck driver's day is getting pulled into the weigh station. DriveWise helps eliminate that stress with their pre-clear technology. It works on all major ELDs or as an app on your phone. DriveWise is now offering a 30-day free trial on DriveWise Pre-Clear. Check them out at drivewise.com. And we've known that for years. The job gets increasingly more dangerous every year because the accident tolls and rates just keep going up. There's more and more traffic, and it was always a dangerous job because of all the factors involved in doing the job, but it's becoming even more dangerous now than it's ever been before. And I get browned off when I look at these mega carriers that are paying these guys cheap money, and the mega carriers don't want to talk about this, and they're going to hate this live stream, and I just don't care. Because the simple fact of the matter is, this is a dangerous job, and you've got to do it well, and you've got to be careful with it. And it hardly seems worthy to me. The average wage of a truck driver now is $41,000. So half of those guys are making less of that. They're at the mega carriers, and I need these guys to fully understand and realize what it is that they've signed up for here, exactly what's involved in this job. There are serious dangers, risks, and liabilities in being a truck driver, and everybody needs to be aware of this. The experienced guys, we all know that, but sometimes we tend to get lax and forget it. The new guys haven't experienced all the things that this job can throw at them, and they need to be careful, and we're going to discuss why. We're going to deep dive into all the different angles the danger comes at you from when you're a truck driver, when you're a professional truck driver. So let's get into it. Now, before we even dive into the dangers of the job itself, we need to recognize the fact that the environment in which we do the job is itself dangerous. Now, 35,000 people died on the highways in the US and Canada last year. And it only stands to reason that the more you're on the highways, the more you're putting yourself at risk. Yet we're in a job that pays us by the mile for the most part, most of us are. And this encourages truck drivers to do more miles, or as many miles as they possibly can. So truck drivers are upping the odds of putting themselves in a dangerous situation. They're in a dangerous environment. So right there, even just being on the interstate these days, there's some danger in that. And we need to recognize that. The public needs to recognize that. The mega carriers need to recognize that. They don't want to talk about it, but it's the simple fact of the matter that trucking is a dangerous job. So let's start now. Let's look at the different areas. Let's start with where most guys start their day. Most guys start their day at a loading dock or in the truck yard or in a warehouse because they're loading. So right there, anybody that has ever worked around heavy equipment knows that this type of an area is a dangerous area, because you're working with heavy equipment, and anywhere where that stuff's moving around and you're involved in, there's some inherent danger in that. Now, I personally have had a couple of friends hit by fork trucks, for instance, while they were on the loading docks supervising the loading of their trailers. And fork trucks, half the time they're backing up because the load's in front of them on the forks. So they got to spin around and look around every once in a while to see where they're going. I've had a few friends nailed by fork trucks, just guys not watching where they're going, and run into drivers supervising their loading. Or they'll get the load on the truck or on the trailer, it'll be insecure, and some of the load will topple on the driver as he's trying to load lock it in, or something like that. We've all seen examples of this. We've seen examples of trailer locks to the doors that have failed, and the trailers started to walk away from the docks as they were loading. That's dangerous. We know that often guys have been hit just coming out from between two drop trailers and inadvertently stepping out into traffic, for instance, as a shunt truck goes by or something like that. Just the shunt guy isn't expecting a pedestrian to step out in front of him. Half the time the truck driver's not paying attention. He forgets where he is, steps out in front of a truck. Or I personally have witnessed one time at a loading dock where a trailer was backing in and pinned a driver between the loading dock and the trailer, and it killed him. And it was an awful thing to witness. It's dangerous to be around heavy moving equipment, and you've always got to be on your game, but all sorts of accidents happen just at the warehouses and the shippers' docks and the loading docks, and even in the truck yards and the truck stops. So right there, just being around heavy equipment, being in that environment, that in itself presents a danger for truck drivers. Moving on, the next thing, it's not just the warehouses and the loading docks that you can get hurt at, it's getting to and from the loading docks. Now, it's interesting to note, and I guess everybody should know this, that when trucking companies bid on freight, they never particularly care where the warehouses are. And oftentimes in big cities, these big warehouses can be in god-awful neighborhoods, especially if they're old companies down in old sections of downtown and stuff like that. And just getting to the warehouse safely can be a challenge, and particularly if it's after dark. And I know one time myself, I got into an argument with the dispatcher that I was working for. I had been in to this warehouse in the daytime, and I'd gone through the neighborhood, and it was in Memphis. I'd gone through the neighborhood in Memphis in the daylight, and I'd seen what kind of a neighborhood I was dealing with, and you could see all the crack addicts sitting on the sidewalk and the curbs and stuff. So a few weeks later, they assigned me another load to this place, and I said, yeah, that's fine. Took the load, and then found out the delivery appointment time was 3 a.m. I thought, well, that's just not a safe neighborhood to go into at 3 a.m. So I called my dispatcher, not thinking anything about it, saying, I need to reschedule this because I don't want to be in that neighborhood at 3 a.m. I want to be in there when the sun comes up. Well, he was ticked right off that I would have the audacity to ask him to change an appointment time. I guess that was just a big deal for him or something like that. And we had quite an argument over the phone. And he just didn't understand that. And he said to me, oh, we've never had any problems in there. And I'm saying to him, it's not just in there at the warehouse, it's getting to the warehouse. There's 5 miles worth of slum to get off the interstate to the warehouse. So that's what and they didn't care. So you've kind of got to look after yourself. You've got to be aware, especially if it's a place that you haven't been before. There is huge potential danger and risk in going into bad neighborhoods. So you've got to do the research yourself. You can't rely on the trucking company to keep you out of trouble in a situation like that, because they don't care where they send you. They're just sending you where the load is or where the load goes. And they don't think about your safety. You've got to be thinking about your safety. So do the research, check out where you're going to be going. Call to see if it's safe. Don't go in at night if you can possibly avoid it, because there's all sorts of danger just on the route in sometimes, depending on where these places are. And you don't know what you're going to run into. So that's another serious problem with trucking. Another serious, dangerous area of trucking is driving through some of these neighborhoods that you need to drive through. Now, here's something that all truck drivers become familiar with very quickly, and that's the fact that unless you're running I-10 along the bottom, and even I-10 you can get a sandstorm, but driving in bad weather or encountering bad weather is a dangerous situation to be in for a truck driver. It's a dangerous situation to be in for anybody on the interstate or the highway. And half the time, the danger isn't just the fact that the road surface is is greased up or snowy, or the visibility's down because of a sandstorm or fog or something. The danger half the time lies in the vehicles around you. And there's so many unskilled drivers on our roads these days. And it takes nothing, it seems, for these guys to get you involved in an accident. And the numbers are against you. The traffic volumes are high. The four-wheelers aren't paying attention to what they're doing. They're looking on their cell phones or whatever. These mega carriers are releasing truck drivers before they're properly trained, and those guys are a hazard. These mega carriers even have untrained teams on the road with these 80,000-pound missiles, and those guys are running in all different weather conditions and stuff, and we've seen some horrific lawsuits showing that. Werner was in a couple of them, but it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, the point is that when you're on an interstate or on a highway or any road and the weather is bad, you're in a dangerous situation. It's dangerous on the road at any time, but when the weather turns against you, and it can turn really ugly depending on where you are in the country, but your danger factor doubles and triples in a situation like that. Like coming down the side of a mountain on an interstate and the road turns to glare ice partway down or something like that, and you've got 45,000 pounds behind you. Man, that's a dangerous situation to be in. So weather is a danger, a constant danger that we as truck drivers face. Finally, another issue, and who would have ever thought this would pose to be a danger to the truck driving community, because it was not intended this way. But tired drivers, we now know that being tired on the road, 1 out of every 4 drivers on the road today is tired, is suffering from a lack of sleep. So they bring in the ELD to control the amount of hours that the carriers can work their truck drivers. And I thought that's a great thing. I really did. I thought that's the ticket. It's going to make sure that guys get proper rest and eat properly, and I was all for it. But I was viewing it as a tool meant to help truck drivers. And that was how the government, the FMCSA, actually introduced it. That was the idea behind it. But a lot of the carriers looked at it and initially thought, oh, this is a bad thing, and then decided to use it to their advantage, and they turned it into an efficiency tool so they could maximize the time that their trucks were running. So yes, they couldn't push their drivers to run 2 and 3 logbooks, but they could say, okay, your 10 hours is up, 10 o'clock in the morning, take your time off, and they have drivers then getting up just at the point where their circadian rhythm is telling them that their bodies need to sleep. So they're getting up tired at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning and being sent back to work by these carriers, because the carrier has put them to bed early because of the hours of service. So then the carrier says, well, no, you're not sleeping all night like you should or you need to. You're going to get up as soon as those 10 hours are up. And they've turned it into an efficiency tool. And it's forcing drivers on the road. And it's sad, because you cannot, in reality, force a driver onto the road. But so many of these new drivers and these young drivers and guys working for these mega carriers are so afraid of losing their job that when the ELD rings at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's snowing like a bastard out and you can't see across the parking lot, the carriers are forcing those new drivers back out on the road because the drivers are going because they're afraid of losing their jobs. And I think that's a tragedy, and I can hardly believe that carriers would use the ELD in this manner. Yet I hear every week from guys that this is happening to, and it's just wrong. So as much as the ELD was intended to help drivers get more sleep, and drivers that aren't afraid of losing their jobs are getting more sleep, but all the new guys that are afraid of losing their jobs and guys working for these mega carriers are being intimidated on being forced out back on the road before they're ready. And that's hugely dangerous, especially to the new driving population, which is a majority of them these days.